Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome back to Tell Me Your Story. When I say welcome back, what I mean by that is, well, welcome back. If you were listening to other programs or to other Tell Me Your Stories, hey, it's great to have you here on this one, along with our very special guest, Beatty Carmichael. And he's got a very interesting conversation he's going to have with us today as we start talking about the work that he is doing through a book that he's got that is basically entitled, I love the title, Outrageous Peace? Really? Outrageous Peace. That's the title of the book. It's also the title, or it's also the website. Add a .com to that. Outrageouspeace.com will be linked to that. And Beatty, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Richard. I'm very excited about being here.
You know, what's interesting is, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, especially, you said you were down south. How far south are you?
Well, you can say I'm almost at LA. So I'm in Alabama, but not quite lower Alabama.
And I do believe, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, for most folks, this is still going on, but some folks who are listening to the archives, it's already happened, and boy, am I grateful that it was happening. You have heard about the monks who are walking to Washington, D.C. from Texas, correct?
I heard something from that. It's vaguely in the back of my mind, but I'm not quite confident on exactly what's going on there.
Well, what's interesting is their goal is not to go to Washington, D.C. to do anything. Their goal is the journey of spreading the message of peace. And that concept is, I think it was Gandhi who said, if you want peace, then be the change that you want to see. And they have a phrase that they're talking about throughout. It's the same phrase every single time, although I've sort of modified it from myself. And their phrase is, I believe it goes, today is my peaceful day. Along those lines, and you just repeat that to yourself, or peace is my this is my peaceful day. This is my peaceful day. You just over and over again, just incorporating that energy, if you will, that mindset of peace within. Doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in the outside world. And boy, they've gone through some traumas too. One of their monks was injured in a car accident. And he's still walking with them, but he's in a wheelchair right now. But he has to go back for a rehab and so forth. Their dog had a little incident that they brought with them from India, and he was a rescue. And so they've had quite a journey. And you have a little slogan here, which I really do like. This is very interesting in regards to outrageous peace. Why this new year, 2026 in particular, why the new year doesn't need a reset. It needs a cleaning first. Okay, I understand why it doesn't need a reset, a reboot, if you will, to use a computer term. But I guess my question, if it needs I beg your pardon, I read this wrong, a clearing. All right, talk to us about what that means, the clearing. Why does it
Yeah.
need a clearing, and how do we clear it?
Well, most people try to start the new year with what do I need to change? Because there are things about themselves and what they do that they don't like. And so change at the New Year resolution level is usually to fix what's wrong. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the challenge with that is we're looking at it a lot of times at the wrong level, from what I've seen. And I think maybe a better first question is, what's creating that internal pressure that I'm feeling that I can release and actually become the person who I am, the real me. In other words, if I don't like who I am, it's because there's something about me that's not fitting my picture of who I should be. I'm unsettled inside. But if I can simply release whatever's blocking me from being me, then I'm going to be perfectly at peace. And that comes from releasing something from within as opposed to applying discipline and effort from without.
Mm.
That's the basic concept behind that.
That ties into a promotion that we have had since September of 2019. And it shifted a little bit after 2020, but it goes like this, that we ask people to take time during this year/decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, and go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. That's kind of what you're talking about, isn't it?
That is not. That is
Uh
that is exactly what I'm talking about. It's not kind of what I'm talking about. It is exactly what I'm talking about.
Now, I'm curious as to the role of your intuition, that still small voice, whatever name we want to give it, in your life and how you came to understand why it is so important for you to
Yeah.
follow.
Those are two big questions. Let's talk about first the role, because I think if you start with the framework, it all starts to make sense. And the framework that I like to suggest is that our life is like a three-legged stool. Each leg has to hold its own weight properly, and when it does, our life is stable. When any of those legs are out of alignment or weakened or broken, then the stool is unstable and it's like our whole life is unstable. So those three legs, very simply, are mental, physical, and spiritual. Not a religious spiritual, but the inner self spiritual, okay?
Mm.
And what happens a lot of times is when our inner self gets out of alignment, there's stress on it. An easy way to express alignment is think about a hickory tree. A hickory tree stands straight up and it's bendable like a spring.
Mm.
If you can bend it down, it'll pop right back up when you take the stress off of it. So imagine that your inner self is that represented by the hickory tree. When we start to hold on to things that weigh us down internally that we should have released, it bends that tree down. And the more it bends, the more stress and strain it creates. Now we have this internal tension that we can't quite figure out, but it manifests in things like irritability, short fuses, anxiety, chronic pain, because what's happening now is when the inner self gets out of alignment, it's weakened. And at that three-legged stool, when one leg gets weak, that means the other two legs have to handle additional strain that they weren't designed to do. And as that strain continues to pull on them, then mentally we start to get things like anxiety or depression or constant frustration and anger. On the physical side, we'll start to get things like a little chronic pain or migraines or persistent sicknesses or asthma or uh, um, what's the allergies,
Hmm.
just little things that we go to the doctor for. Sometimes the doctor doesn't know have a solution. Sometimes they do, but we start to look at only the physical and mental and say there must be something wrong. We try to treat the symptom when the reality is the source of the problem is this inner alignment that's misaligned. And you can't fix misalignment by outside effort because it wasn't a weakness of something on your end that did it. It was an alignment issue. So rather than focusing hard on discipline against how I think and strong attitude, positive attitude, or exercise more or eat better, you'll find a lot of these things are on the spiritual side of that leg, and you strengthen that, get it back in alignment, and these things start to disappear. I've seen things like just simple example. An acquaintance of mine came up to me a couple of weeks ago and said, "I'm really dealing with anxiety," and I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, something happened with my wife. She was diagnosed with something, and I got really afraid. This was about a year and a half ago. And I went to the doctor that he said, well, this is anxiety. You're going to have it the rest of your life. So let's get you on some meds." And I said, well, it sounds like an alignment issue to me. And I led him through a simple process to how to allow your inner self to surface what is the issue that it's holding on to that you need to release, guided him on how to release it. By the end of the day, his anxiety was gone.
Mm.
That's that's what this thing is all about.
Wow. That's very cool. Um, this concept of outrageous peace, again, and I'm going to differentiate. I'm going to define so that we aren't confused here or
Okay.
confusing people. There is no religious component in this, and to be more precise, if we were involved in religion, the true definition would be taking care of the widows, the orphans, and the children. That is true religion, not building a church and all those kinds
Yeah,
of things.
exactly.
What we're talking about here is more of a spiritual concept, but also more than that, certainly. But the spiritual component has to do with us not actually per se doing anything because we've already been doing a lot of stuff that's actually caused the misalignment. And to that point, there are those who, and I'm going to certainly have the video set up so that people can see this. You have behind you not only a picture of the cover of your book, Outrageous Peace, but you also have I'll say, a painting on the wall. I'm guessing that yellow, gold, orange stream that's going up is sort of the alignment position that you are now talking about to get us from misalignment to alignment. And am I correct that it doesn't really take it's not about per se doing anything. I don't have to do anything,
Mm-mm.
in the physical. It's got to take place in here. It's got to take place inside.
Yeah. So, uh, to clarify, and you're absolutely right, this is not religious, and this really isn't about spirituality. Okay. When I say the three-legged stool is mental, physical, and spiritual, it's that the spiritual is simply, it's not mental and it's not physical, but there's something there. If you think about your conscience lets you know if you do right or wrong. When you do right, you feel excited because you help someone. When you do wrong, you hurt someone, you feel like, gosh, I'm guilty, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the spiritual side I'm talking about. And when we do, in a very simplistic sense, when we do something that is out of alignment with our inner self, our conscience, which is what's true for me. It may not be true for you, but it's what's true for me. Then I'm out of alignment internally, and that's the spiritual part I'm talking about. It's just this non-mental, non-physical, but it's a real part of us. And once I get out of alignment there, then that misalignment starts to impact those other two legs of the stool.
Mm.
So all I have to do, and this isn't about work and effort. It's not, and believe it or not, Richard, it's not really going back and saying, Where did I do something wrong? It's not about blame or shame. Let me see if this makes sense. Have you ever had anything in your life, Richard, where maybe business wise, radio wise, you're working through this problem mentally? You can't quite figure it out. So you just kind of put it aside, handle other stuff. And then one day you're taking a shower and all of a sudden it comes the full answer, fully developed, and it pops in your brain. Have you ever had that happen?
I have, and what's fascinating in the example you're using is you have in the shower, you have the water coming down, and it's sort of there's something about water that does that. But please continue.
Yeah. What happened is this. You acknowledged a problem, but you couldn't figure out because it wasn't of your own effort. And so you gave, in essence, by trying to figure out, you gave your subconscious or an unconscious part of your brain permission to figure it out for you. It takes no effort on your part. And at one point when you're just totally relaxed, not even thinking about it, instantly the answer comes up. Your subconscious surfaces it, and now you can act on it. This is the same thing about alignment. Alignment, a simple tool that I like to use is it's a 3-step reset tool. It's name it, locate it, release it. So the first step is name it. Go back to my friend, for example. Name it. I've got this anxiety I can't get rid of. I don't know what's going on. So I basically say, this isn't the word. I don't want to sound kind of weird on this, but you give yourself, I give you permission to figure out what am I holding on to that I should release that's tied to this anxiety. And then what happens is your inner self, that conscience, says, you finally give me permission now to figure it out. So it goes, because that hickory tree, he knows what's pulling it down. So he says, it's this rope right here. There's a weight at the bottom. So your conscience brings up this thing that says, remember, you're holding on to fear over that prognosis with your wife. You just need to release fear because you can't do anything about it, right? Holding on to it does no good. So then, now that's locating it, but you didn't do it, your inner self did, and then you simply release it. I choose to release the fear that I've been holding on to because there's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to take pragmatic action, but it does no good to stay afraid. So he releases it. Take a deep breath, let it out, and now you're released. Now what happens is that third leg starts to get strong, and before long, the tension that is putting on that mental leg where the anxiety is takes off that tension, and anxiety dissipates. Peace restores when you remove that which is blocking it. It takes no effort. It's just releasing.
You correct me if I'm wrong here. Now, your website, which again that I have here, is getradicalfaith.org. Now, that is your ministry, correct?
Right. So you'll have several websites with me. My ministry is helping set people free, and so that's something I do in a different line. That is actually a religious component of what I do.
Sure.
But Outrageous Peace is purely secular because it's simply the framework of, like, if you think about Gandhi, we mentioned Gandhi, the framework of living in peace and not holding anything against anyone could be framed religiously. It could also be framed secularly, but it's really just a fact of life of when you hold nothing against anything, then you're automatically going to be at peace.
It's an an extraordinary concept that and I say that because of the world in which we happen to be living today. By the same token, although I acknowledge the Chinese proverb that says, may you live in interesting times, there hasn't been a time in human history that hasn't been interesting. It all
Correct.
just depends upon on how you perceive it. Perception seems to be a huge aspect of this as well, and we're going to talk more about that with our very special guest talking about outrageous peace. And his name is Beatty Carmichael, and we're going to continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Reverend Dr. D. Richard Dugan, and it's a really fascinating time in which we live, Beatty, because in spite of the fact that what I said just a few moments ago, that we always, humans have always lived in interesting times, it just depends on your perception. I interviewed a woman not long ago from Brazil. We were talking about trauma, which certainly interferes with peace. But the way we talked about it, she says that it is not the event that is the trauma, it's our perception of the event,
Yeah.
i.e., you and I were both watching the television, um, and we're watching the Twin Towers come down on 9/11. And I will be honest with you, and this was my first thought when I saw the images. I get a phone call, someone says, "You need to turn on the news." And I did. And I was going, wow, they've really gotten good at CGI. This is incredible. And you have family and friends who work in those buildings, and you are mortified and you are dumbstruck and you just collapse. And it's because of the connections and so forth. I don't know anybody in the buildings. And I've even shared with people, all right, you want to get to, you talk about fake news and fake science and all those things. Okay, I'll take you one better. From my perspective, from Phoenix, Arizona, September 11th, 2001, I wasn't there. It didn't happen. Now that's for me. I'm not saying to you, Beatty, it didn't happen. I'm saying for me, because I wasn't physically there, I didn't see it with my own two eyes. I mean, that's kind of where we are today in terms of things that happen. The monks that are traveling from Texas to Washington, D.C. I could sit here and say, it didn't happen because I wasn't there. I wish they'd come through Twin Peaks, where I live near Lake Arrowhead here in California, but they didn't. And so that's when we get into that area of faith. But back to the trauma and perspective. This whole aspect of outrageous peace, isn't that part of the equation in terms of perception, that if I'm not feeling peaceful, it's because of my perception of what I have just seen or heard or read, whether I was there or not,
Yes.
and so forth. Talk to us
Th-
about that.
yeah. So I made a comment earlier that alignment is to your inner truth.
Mhm.
It's not to my inner truth. It is tied to you. That's why two people can see the same event. One is traumatized, the other is fascinated, because the inner truth is different for each person. And it's not the event that happened, it's our response to that event. For if we
Mm.
take trauma. And that response is that inner self getting out of alignment. And once it's out of alignment, because it's now been traumatized, it's now under stress. But that trauma and that stress has no bearing on reality of life. It's only our perception of that reality. And the other thing, this is real interesting, Richard, is like what you were describing, if we use the Twin Towers, I can be traumatized by it or I can simply accept it. Both answers are my choice, but it doesn't change the outcome of what happened or what's going to happen. In other words, it's called water under the bridge, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Where the stress comes up and the imbalance is when I try to push that water back upstream, back underneath the bridge, and it's impossible. But I think I can, so I stress and stress, kind of a metaphor only, to try to do it. And the reality is, I just need to let it go because there's nothing I can do. That's what happened with my friend with the anxiety. He just had to let go of the fear. It's a fearful event. That trauma of watching the Twin Towers come down is a fearful event. But you just have to let it go because there's nothing you can do. And it's your choice to release it, and it's your choice to hold on to it. What we don't realize is that choice has consequences mentally and physically. And a lot of times the things that we're dealing with in life, the things that we're actually, go back to the start of the show, What am I going to do with my New Year's resolution? A lot of the times, those things, but on the resolutions or other things in our life, are tied to these things that we're trying to get rid of. And we just don't know that it's actually something that we have total control over. And it takes no effort, it just takes releasing.
Yeah. Outrageous Peace is the title of the book. It's just, to me, I've used this phrase this over and over again on this program, and that is that it certainly is needed now in this time in which we live, not because of what's happening out there, but because of how we have processed it internally.
That's it.
And somehow, I don't know if I'm right or wrong in this statement, but I would love your observation as well. And that is that we have been programmed or lied to or misled to believe, whatever it is that has caused us to not be at peace. And there's some things that I have done. Now, granted, again, I recognize that this is not about doing anything physically. However, what I have noticed, Beatty, is that when I am doing something like pulling a box off of the pile over against the wall, going over, putting it on a chair, opening it up and unpacking it and deciding throw away, thrift store, keep. Or if I'm outside, and this happened this morning as of our conversations, I went outside to throw away some stuff in the recycle bin or a garbage can. And apparently a raccoon or something had popped the lid off of the regular garbage can and dove in there and tossed everything around. And where we live actually literally on a hill. There's a hill. I mean, it's very steep down the side of the house. And there was a lot of stuff there up on top where the garbage cans are, but there was a lot of stuff down that hill. So I walked down very carefully and I picked up the garbage as I'm going down the hill and I walk back up and I get it all cleaned up. And it was like, first of all, I wasn't angry with the animals. Okay. Obviously, I didn't seal the garbage can well enough, so I'm going to make sure to do that. I felt good about being outside. It was like 40 degrees. It felt really energizing. And I'm there cleaning up and making the place look nice again and so forth. And it was like I wasn't thinking about anything else. And it felt so good. It almost brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. And I felt like all is right with the world. And someone said, well, yeah, but there's garbage everywhere. That's not the point. The point is I'm living in a house that my wife and I bought. I'm outside in nice, cool weather, which we love. I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona, if that gives you a reason why I love the cold air. and I'm indirectly interacting with the animals. Okay? And it was so wonderful. And I'm going to say I was at peace. Even though as I'm walking down that hill, if I fall, I'm going to slide all the way down. And I got to walk back up. I wasn't thinking that. It seems to me that when we can do something like that, I'm not saying that we're looking for a distraction, because I wasn't. I was taking out the garbage and I saw this situation and I said, well, I should take care of this. And hey, clear skies and it's beautiful, the pine tree. So talk to me about that aspect of life and looking for, so to speak, that outrageous peace.
Yeah. So what you're describing is actually a little bit different, believe it or not, than what I'm describing with outrageous peace.
Okay.
And this is where a lot of times we get a little confused. It's the difference between peace versus calm. See if this makes sense.
Yes.
Peace is when your three legs of your stool are strong, and therefore your stool, which represents you as a being, as a person, is completely stable. It doesn't matter what's coming against you from the outside. Inside, you're stable. And because you're stable, you can handle whatever comes against you. It doesn't rock your world. Calm is something that you manage. You can manage a quiet room. You can manage soothing music. You can manage shutting off all communication devices so no one can get to you, and you can calm yourself. But calm is temporary. is only temporary because it's externally controlled. You can be calm and still have an inner stress going on of just something running. Like one of the neighbors in my neighborhood has a sign on the back of her car that says, "I run to get rid of the crazies." What that means is she's trying to use an outside force and discipline to handle something that's inside, and it will never work. She may force calm temporarily, but it's like driving a car that's really bad out of alignment. You can hold it straight on the road, but as soon as you let go, it's going to pull right off again. And it's a constant battle. That's the difference is calm versus peace. With outrageous peace, it's a process. I don't want to call it a process because process defines like, there's rules involved and there's work, but there's a pattern, a proven pathway to real peace that I've worked and kind of perfected in guiding people through that allows them to simply name the things that they're dealing with, actually bring it to the surface as I'm ready to address it, and then let your inner self start to identify what's the source of it. So then you can release it. And as we just simply have and it's basically what I would call a non-religious meditative prayer, not prayer like a religious prayer, but just voicing something out loud that gives your inner self, that conscience part of you, a permission to say, bring it to surface so I can release it. Here's kind of what goes on. It's really interesting, Richard, is so let's talk about unforgiveness as just an example. Unforgiveness says, someone hurt me and I know I should just let it go because I can't do anything about it. But I choose to hold bitterness in my heart. Now, my conscience tells me that bitterness is wrong. But then my natural part of me says, but that person hurt me so much, I'll never forgive them. Now, watch what happens scientifically. The medical community backs this up. Holding unforgiveness keeps you in a fight or flight mode, increases adrenaline and cortisol production, which starts to wear down your body, create exhaustion, increase body fat, organ failure, depression, all of that scientifically from unforgiveness. So what you're doing is when you say, I'll never forgive them, it's like taking your inner self and saying, shut up. I don't want you to tell me to forgive him. I'm not. So it holds on and it just backs up. For you to release it, that inner self is going to need a safe space to work in. And you need to kind of, this sounds corny, but follow the metaphor on this. You need to give your inner self a safe permission that says, okay, I'm ready to deal with this. I know you tried to bring it up earlier, and I shut you down hard, but now I give you permission because I'm ready. And then your conscience says, oh, okay, now he's ready. Let me go search for whatever it is that I'm out of balance with, and I'm going to bring it to the surface because I'm ready to get rid of it myself. And so it brings it to the surface, you release it, and now your stool gets more stable until it's perfectly stable. That is outrageous peace. It's different than calm.
And I have made this statement before, and it is an apolitical statement, but it's based upon 2015, June 15th. People know what I'm talking about, and you may also. And I have watched over the last 10, now 11 years. And I know as a metaphysician well enough that no one can continue to put out the kind of caustic venom that he has put out and actually live. Now, I'm not saying anything other than he is not doing himself any favors physically, mentally, emotionally, and maybe even spiritually. But it's one of those, and this is where I created this 4-step program where I got sucked into the political situation in 2016 September. Took me 6 months to get unsucked, as it were. But I came up in January of 2017 with this 4 steps. And the first one was really hard because my inner voice said, and you have to say this out loud, not in your head.
Yes.
And that is, to my point of just a moment ago, thank you, teacher, for teaching me how not to be. The next step is, I forgive you, but more importantly, I forgive myself for allowing myself to be dragged into this quagmire. The third is non judgmental question. What is it that you're so afraid of that makes you be this way? I'm not asking you to change. I want to understand. I will not tolerate you. I will accept you. You have every right to be here just like the rest of us, but I don't have to like into this whole situation. So I want to understand. And then one of my guests later, when I was sharing this, said, "You forgot one," or "Let me add one to it." And he says, "You have to say from the same space as the third step, I love you." Again, going back to you have every right to be here. You're just playing the role that you've chosen to play coming here to this planet and so on and so forth. Now, some people will cringe at that and say, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me. No way." Well, let me ask you a question. You ever heard of living somewhere rent free? You can't do it on this planet, but
Mhm.
others can live up in your head rent free. And that's what you are allowing anybody that you have resentment towards to do. And then you're harming you, not them. And that's what you were just saying.
That's
Was
exactly it. Now
yeah.
expand that out. Expand that out. It's so unforgiveness is one form of where misalignment occurs. But there are other things. Think about there are things that we've done in our past that we regret. And they usually involve either hurting ourselves or hurting someone else. It could be something different, but it usually involves something like that.
Hmm.
And we just move on, but we never release it. So that's another way of misalignment. Another type of misalignment is maybe trying to live up to someone else's standards, the people pleaser thing. And you're always in stress because you're always on walking on eggshells because what's this guy going to do with how I am walking? There are a lot of different ways of misalignment, and there are things that we don't even realize that are misalignments because they're not within the confines of something that hurt me or that I hurt someone else, but they're in other areas of misalignment that's violating this internal truth. And what happened with me is as I started going down this journey, I start testing things. I've come from 7 generations of medical doctors, so that means that our whole lineage is a scientific mindset that says test, confirm. And so I started doing this over the last 10 years, recognizing that there's things that medical and psychiatric science can't help because people stay stuck. And what's the deeper root? And I'm starting to realize there's a misalignment. And in working through this, where I ended up writing my book, Outrageous Peace, is it all culminates into one simple process, and that is a specific type of words that you speak out loud. It's interesting you're talking about speaking out loud. Speaking out loud makes it clear, okay? And you speak out loud this process. I don't know a better word. Meditative prayer. It's not a prayer, but it's just a verbalizing this process to give your inner self the permission to bring to the surface what you need to release. Sometimes the release is simply say, I release it. Other times it may be something where you break it or renounce, or I don't want to get funny words, but what I'm finding is there, depending on what it is, there could be the process is slightly different, but the general idea is I got to release it, let it go, so that my inner self comes back into perfect alignment. And I have found that when you simply do that type of approach uh, over just a period of a few days or a week or so, things keep coming to mind that your inner self is saying, it's time to release this one too, and this one, and this one. And then as you do, you'll find yourself start to recover, and all these issues in your mental and your physical side of life seem to just slowly disappear and go away. And all it was that misalignment.
Hmm. You are listening to Tell Me Your Story with Beatty Carmichael and yours truly, Reverend Dr. D. And we are talking about, I can't help but do it this way, Beatty, outrageous peace. Reverend Dr. D here with Beatty Carmichael. And outrageous peace is the subject matter. I don't think that it brings too much peace to people when they hear me go outrageous, but who knows? Um, this is so necessary throughout our lives. And I could sit here, Beatty, and I might, if I can remember them, I can give you the names of the people who, by others' reckonings, have wronged me in some way, shape, or form. Okay. Um, I will give you just one, and that is going back to, I think it was like the mid late 80s. I was working for a Christian radio station. One of our programmers, his name was actually, I kid you not, King Gold. All right, that was his name. And he had this building that he had refurbished. It was a former restaurant, and he had painted the walls gold. Okay.
Wow.
And he would hold church services there and so forth. And he offered me a job. And I was on my way to the radio station that morning with my letter of resignation to the general manager. And I stopped by the church and he was gone. Just, and I haven't heard from him since. And I thought, well, but he offered me this job. Boy, I'm glad I stopped here. Boy, it's like that whole inner voice saying, stop at the church first. And I kept that letter of resignation in my car when I got, or on my bicycle. I was bicycling, in my bicycle pack and so forth. But it's like he did what he did. All right. Now, for whatever the reasons are, which I don't know, and none of my business, he did what he did. He took off. Um, on the one hand, someone say, "Well, but he really did you a disservice. He really did you wrong because he offered you this job, and then poof." So, yeah, but how did that really impact me? Because I didn't quit my job. I kept it and moved on, and waited another 5 or 7 years. And then there are others as well, but it's like I don't like the drama. I mean, even in television programs, I really don't like watching a lot of the police dramas and the mystery this and the so on and so forth. And I don't care for that. I don't care for that in my personal life between myself and my wife. I don't like the drama. Now, that's not to say that if something comes up, I acquiesce and I just back away and stuff it. But it's like I know that this is not good for me. The other and King Gold, he didn't care. He's gone. You know, so it doesn't affect him. So why would I injure myself? And the only conditions, health issues that I'm dealing with here, I am 65. The only one I'm really dealing with right now is the high blood sugar. I'm dealing with getting that in balance, which kind of tells me I have a feeling you're going to tell me that, yeah, well, I understand you don't like the drama and you don't hold resentments and so forth, but there must be something you're holding on to that if you let it go, you might get back into balance both physically as well.
Yeah. So I want to be sensitive on that because I don't want this to sound like a magic pill. It'll solve every problem.
Okay.
But with that said, anecdotally, I have found that on simple things, pardon the expression, but this is my life of alignment. Simple things, anxiety, depression, anger issues, chronic pain, um, uh, uh, little little sickness issues that are just constantly sick, come up and go, and allergies and things of that sort. A lot of those type of things, and even relationship conflicts, all have frequently have a source of a inner balance that's out of alignment. And as people go through this process that I share in the outrageouspeace.com book, then about 90% of them see those things disappear. Not necessarily immediately. It may be gradually over a week or a couple of weeks. I remember like one lady, she's been having this. She was having. It's been interesting talking about unforgiveness. She was having extreme pain in her thighs with neuropathy. The doctor said it's permanent. There's no cure, and here's some heavy pain meds. And she'd been having it for about 15 years. And I said, well, it sounds like it could be an alignment issue because doctors don't know how it comes on. So she started going through this process, and her inner self in this process surfaced someone that hurt her. And so she released that bitterness to that person. And within 2 or 3 days, all of the pain of that neuropathy had left. Now, let me ask you a question.
Hmm.
How long ago do you think, now she had that pain for 15 years. How long ago do you think it was when that person hurt her that she held on to that bitterness?
I would say more than 15 years.
Yeah, it was right, just slightly over 15 years. Because what happens is when we get out of alignment, things don't instantly go. They gradually, peace thins. So if you think about peace as this internal stability, everything's stable, mental, physical, and spiritual are all stable. When that alignment internally gets out of alignment, then the peace starts to thin. It doesn't happen overnight. Because if you think about like that tree, that hickory tree, if I pull a little bit of weight on it, it's going to bend a little bit. But the longer it stays there, the more it bends, the more stress it's under. And gradually it pulls it down deeper and deeper. And that puts the stress on mental and physical legs gradually over time. But then once you release it, then the release of the stress on those other legs happens really quick.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of things we deal with. I remember a friend of mine, he's our age. I'm 60, you're 65, he's in between. His adult son, for the last 15 years, his son is about 30, it was the worst relationship in his entire family. They have 5 kids. You know, family get-togethers, it always blows up in heated, angry, yelling arguments. And I tell my son, my friend John, I said, well, sounds like something's out of alignment relationally. And I guide him through this process. And it actually dealt with how to address misalignment with his son. And he handled it very delicately in asking forgiveness towards something that he recognized his son was probably out of alignment on. What actually happened in this case, about age 15, he gets this huge pay raise, this promotion. He's now working like, 60, 70 hours a week. And so the time he spent with his other sons playing ball and being with them, he couldn't do with his 15-year-old son. His son got hurt and held on to it. And that created the relationship conflict because now there's this tension and this bitterness that his son couldn't even identify. So my friend John wrote him an apology, expressed, I think this may be what happened here. This is when I had no control over my career. They gave me this huge promotion and I ran for it. And his son recognized it and was able to release. And he says now, just 6 months later, he says, that son is my best child relationship. And now I'm working with all my children to bring them all in alignment as well. Mm. So this can handle even relationship type of issues.
Now, when we're going through the process, and of course, the first thought that comes to my mind is therapy, whether a psychologist, psychiatrist,
Mm-hmm.
or you, Beatty, who would take us through this process. It is not necessarily required that we go to the person who who we have forgiven and processed and released, to go to them and say, I did this process and I want you to know that I have forgiven you and so on and so forth. Because then you're kind of stirring the waters of that person to where
Yeah.
that's not what you want to do, because now they've got to deal with all of that they feel guilty for having put you through in that,
Right.
and that, by the way, that's the other thing too, is when someone says, you make me feel, sorry, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
You have chosen to feel that way because of, and so forth.
It's a
But
choice.
anyway,
Thank you for
go,
bringing that up.
yeah.
Yes.
But going back to the first premise of you don't need to go to the person.
Mm-mm. You don't. So what happened with the story I just shared with John is it wasn't John's unforgiveness toward the son. It was recognizing that his son had unforgiveness toward him. And
Mm.
so John helped his son identify it, right? Name it, locate it, and then release it. That was the key. So that's why he went to his son with that. But I teach as a volunteer at a women's addiction recovery center. It's a residential program. They house about 500 women here in my city. And I'm routinely seeing a real high percentage of these women get free of addictions and all kinds of things using this alignment process. And when it comes to forgiveness, I remember as I was teaching this on just one impact of misalignment is unforgiveness. And this lady raised her hand and said, Mr. Carmichael, I was raped by 4 men. How can I forgive them? And see, that's a real big issue.
Yeah.
And that's when, you have to separate the trauma from what you're holding on to. You're holding on to the trauma. You can't undo it. And you definitely don't need to go back to those men and say, well, I forgive you. No. What unforgiveness is your own personal, internal letting it go. And as she did, she said, it's like this weight just lifts off her shoulders because it's that weight of being out of alignment. And now it comes back into alignment because it's entirely the choice to hold on to it or to just let it go because you can't do anything about it.
I need to spend some time with you. Things have come up in my mind that I think about comparison between my early days, teens, and early 20s before I was married, how I used to feel,
Yeah.
and since then. And I think that I remember reading too that stress can affect one's glucose levels. My doctor doesn't agree. He says, no, no, that's not true. But what I read was that your stress affects your hormones. Insulin is a hormone. And if I have stress that is affecting my pancreas, then my pancreas is either A, not putting on enough or putting too much or whatever it is. And I can also tell you as far as anger, um, I've heard it said that the liver and the gallbladder in particular are the seats of anger in our bodies. And I remember when I was diagnosed with a gallstone and an infected gallbladder, that prior to that, and I'll use the example of spilling a glass of milk on the table, I would go, right? I'd go on, and then I'd clean it up and so forth. After the gallbladder was removed, I kid you not, it would be,
Wow.
that
Yeah.
it was incredible. So I'm sitting here going, I got to talk to this guy. I got to talk to Beatty Carmichael about outrageous peace. I got to work through some of these things that I know are now bubbling up in the front of my brain and my mind because I'm 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 tired.
Yeah.
And I know
So,
a lot of people are just they're exhausted.
well, I would be happy to talk with you. I can't talk with everyone in your audience.
No.
So I want the audience to understand that the whole process of like when you and I will talk, it's all that's outrageous piece, by the way. It's 70 pages. You can read it in 45 minutes. It's really short, but it lays out the framework of what's going on and the exact reset process that you can energize your inner self just to bring these things to the surface and let it go. But real interesting, you mentioned a lot of these things do happen in early childhood. I was talking to a man named David, and he was for 26 years dealing with anxiety and depression. And I said, it sounds like the out of balance thing. I said, when did it begin? Diagnostically, I just want to know. He said, about 14, something with my mom. I said, well, it sounds like you may just be holding on to something. I guided him through the simple process of releasing it. By the end of the day, both his anxiety and depression had melted away. So what you start to see is those type of things. I want to bring a medical approach to what you're dealing with. You're talking about stress, having issues with blood sugar levels. Here's scientifically what happens when you have stress. I'm going to use it in terms of either unforgiveness or anything else. When you're in stress, your body is now in fight or flight mode. So it's going to secrete adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline to give you bursts of energy. Cortisol, watch this. It does two things. It creates a hunger for carbs, which is sugars, to keep your body able to fight or run. At the same time, it starts to shut down operations in your body that consume energy. One of the big things it starts to minimize is your white blood cell counts because that takes energy to produce. So now, when you hold on to stress, which could be a stress on anything, including unforgiveness, it keeps your body in fight or flight mode. So you have constant cortisol and adrenaline being secreted, constantly suppressing everything. And now it causes weight gain for some people, the visceral fat, because you're eating carbs. When you eat carbs, that's your glucose level going up. It'll convert it to fat, which is visceral fat. And now you start to have potential organ failure. And at the same time, it blocks your dopamine and serotonin in your brain, which are the feel-good hormones. So you start to run into depression. All of this tied to not releasing the thing that's causing stress. So for you, it could be your sugar levels are tied to this very same thing. One of the guys, I didn't want to mention this because this is not normal, but it ties into this. His wife had type 2 diabetes. She was on 1,000 milligrams of whatever the diabetes medicine is. And guiding her through this process of releasing stressors in her life, within 5 months, she's no longer on her medication. She no longer has type 2 diabetes because it was stress induced. It wasn't chemical induced or biologically induced. So there really is a lot of correlation here on a lot of things that just going through the process of outrageous peace and freeing your inner self to give it a safe zone to start to surface these things that you've been quenching in the past. And finally understanding that it hurts to quench. So now you're willing to release. It'll start bringing things up, allowing you to release it. And you'll see this huge shift in your life over time, but over a short period of time. And that's where outrageous peace becomes real reality for you.
Hmm. Well, folks, you'll hopefully get to experience that as I continue doing these programs. Beatty, this is in addition to these programs being part of my therapy, as I call it.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a place where I share an awful lot of myself, where I even say that if someone has been following me over my 46 and a half year career in interviewing, I've shared so much of myself that they could write my unauthorized biography. Because I look at it this way. I mean, I worked for 15 years for this Christian station back in the 80s, early 90s, and I came to this conclusion, especially when it came to the internet in 94 when I got on, and I said, and my privacy's gone. What I understand, what I believe is that the creator, God, the universe already knows everything. And if in this day and time, 8.5 billion other people know, what difference does it make? And besides, most of them don't care. They're too busy just surviving and living their lives. Um, and I am grateful for your book, Outrageous Peace. I'm going to spend some time going through it and reading it as well, and then we'll touch base as well and go from there. This has just been an yeah. I've got two missing teeth, and I think they're my eye teeth. Um, this has been an extraordinary program, and I hope that we can have you back to continue this conversation. And maybe in having you back, I know that you've gone through it. I understand that. I would love to go further in depth if we can
I would
in
love
this
to.
process, as well as I've asked this question, and I'll go ahead and put this question to you now, and that is, I have many guests on this program who've written books who have found, quote unquote, a solution for themselves. And the question has to do with, so why do you care? You found your solution. So what? What about let the other people find their own? What is it that compels you to share this particular message of outrageous peace?
You'll be surprised to know the answer. I had zero problems personally. I have never needed outrageous peace in my life because I never had any significant imbalance. What happened with me is about 10 years ago, I started to recognize that people were suffering in things that they were stuck with, and the medical community had no answers for it. My father-in-law, who died 20 years ago, he'd practiced internal medicine for 50 years. He would always tell me, he said, Beatty, health is based on three things: mental, physical, and spiritual. And so when you had an issue, he'd ask you what your issue is, and he would sit you down and actually talk to you, identifying is it mental, spiritual, physical, or spiritual, and then help assign the process to get free. And he was extremely successful in bringing healing to his patients. What's happened is this medical and psychiatric side of our community has left out the spiritual. Now they only are diagnosed with mental and physical and try to solve it there. And as I started to see the people in pain and hurt and frustration, something welled up within me to say, go back to the roots. I was in business for many years and I never went into medicine. So I went back to the healing roots that was in my family DNA for almost 200 years and said, there's got to be a solution. And out of compassion, I started trying things because it was a problem to solve, and I love solving problems. And as the problem started to reveal itself, and I started to perfect the process over the years into something that now, when I statistically measured it with my classes at this addiction recovery center, of those ladies who went through this process, and for them it took about a month, 87%, all their addictions gone, their chronic pain's gone, their mental illness is gone. By and large, almost all of that disappeared. And it started to show me something that this is a big issue. And so much of it is on that third leg that no one's been taught about. So for me, there was just the desire to say people need help. And that's why I wrote the book. That's what I'm doing. It's this whole process for 10 years. I'm just extending it now by saying, here's what I found because people need freedom.
Yeah. Oh God, you struck a chord there. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And you can define truth however you want, but in this context, as you and I are talking, ye shall know the truth about yourself.
Yes.
Now, I noticed that you left out emotional. Now, I'm guessing, just guessing, that the reason is because the emotional component is affected by the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. And that
Yeah.
when you deal with the physical, mental, and spiritual, the emotional is taken care of, so to speak.
Yeah. So the emotional is actually part of that spiritual.
Okay. All
Right.
right. Very good. So
That
it's a,
that's
okay.
it's part of it, but most people think of it slightly different. And if I may be honest with you, it's hard to talk about a four-legged stool, but a three-legged, just because it makes more sense that way. Because when you're emotionally out of whack, it's because you're misaligned. So it's all tied into that area.
Folks, I don't know about you, but this is you need to get a copy of Outrageous Peace, and it's outrageouspeace.com is the website that you can go to. And can they get to your I'm going to say your ministerial website through that website?
Yeah, so best thing to get to that part, to learn more about me and to try to reach out to me, the ministerial website is more of a very religious Bible teaching type stuff.
Sure,
And
sure.
that's all that's over there. But you can go find that, getradicalfaith.org. If you were to search Beatty Carmichael on YouTube, I have another book so Outrageous Peace is the entry level into the swimming pool of understanding alignment. This is the zero entry level, right? And then I have a second book that you'll see a lot on YouTube called The Prayer of Freedom, and it takes it into a deeper dive into the deep end.
Yeah, I saw that.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so they're all part of the same framework. It's
Hmm.
just where you enter the water. Um, but BeattyCarmichael.com, you can learn more about me. Um, I encourage people, if this holds interest, start at outrageouspeace.com. You can download a free chapter. There's a link directly to the right page on Amazon to get the book so you don't miss it with other books talking about peace. And there's some other information there. So that would be outrageouspeace.com.
And being a short book, is it available in Audible, or is it just a better thing to grab a copy and read it for yourself?
Yeah, right now it's not in Audible. I'm working on getting that put together. But so right now, you have either digital or paperback.
I'd love to help you with the Audible version. I really would. It's something I do. I've been narrating as well as producing Audibles for a lot of years. Even with my first wife, who was totally blind, I would record on cassette
Yes,
different books. I even have on reel to reel, going back a ways.
that is old.
Yes, it is.
Oh, sorry, you're not old, but that is old.
That
Okay.
is old. Gerald Jampolsky's Letting Go, Love is Letting Go of Fear. I think I also recorded James Redfield's, long before his was Audible, I think. James Redfield's The Celestine Prophecy. I've had him on this program as well. And there's just so much out there. And the one thing I know that some people appreciate this, and that is that you're not preachy. And you're not, because I've had this happen on this program where people are quoting book chapter, and verse from the Bible. And the one thing that has struck me over the years is that's fine. I'm not being critical by any means. And if it helps you, if it strengthens your faith, uh, do it. That's what's more important than anything else. And I've been exposed to people at that station where they would share a particular story, and then they would be brought down saying, "Well, there's nothing in the Bible about that." And it's like, what, you don't understand. This person just had an experience that has changed their lives, and you are now destroying their lives by telling them that it's wrong, it's irrelevant, et cetera, et cetera. So I appreciate your perspective, and I would love to have you back to talk about the other books that you've written as well in this light. As you say, this is the foundation, so to speak, of the work that you do. Outrageous Peace, and we thank you so much for being a part of what we're doing here.
Well, thank you, Richard. This has been just a real pleasure and joy, and hopefully it really helps those listening that need freedom someplace to get free.
I'm Richard Dugan. This is Beatty Carmichael, Reverend Dr. D. I go by. This is Tell Me Your Story, and I want to thank you so much for being with us here. I do have three final questions that I would like to ask you, that I ask all of my guests. But first, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday mornings at 1 a.m. Wednesdays at 9 a.m. and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. All 9 times. You can hear streaming live at richarddugan.com. Podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're on YouTube where you can watch these conversations and get to know Beatty Carmichael a little better by watching him. And there is something to that, I guarantee you, energetically. We hope that you will subscribe and click notification. We also hope you'll pick up a copy of my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life. It's available in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle. And we hope that you will leave us a tip. Our tip jar is called PayPal. And on the homepage at richarddugan.com, there's a link to Amazon for Choices, 5 Steps for Life, and to PayPal if you can leave us a tip. And we thank you. Thank you for those who can and those who will help us out. We also ask that you take time during this, the decade of perfect vision, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place where, I remind you, no one else can go to. And listen to and follow the promptings of that still small voice. And with all of that being said, we go to our final 3 questions for our very special guest. Number 1, who is Beatty Carmichael?
Beatty Carmichael is a child of God who tries his best to share that love of God and his peace to people wherever. I've abandoned my business in order to get this message out.
Well, we're glad to be a part of getting the message out. Another question for you is what gets you up in the morning?
Um, it's really interesting. Used to have lots of interests, lots of passions, learn this, learn that, do that activity. Once I started moving in this direction, the only thing that gets me up is this. And let me explain. I used to take a 20-minute nap every afternoon because I'd just be wiped out. And I'd find myself never having enough sleep and running short on energy. As I start to work on this and seeing the results in people's lives, because they're emailing me all the time, overwhelmed, going through my BeattyCarmichael.com website and just contacting me of what this has done in their lives. I'm literally right now, because of the things we're doing and trying to get this in other languages, I'm probably working 12 and 16-hour days, and I have more energy than anything else. I can't wait to get up and work on this. So what gets me up in the morning is pursuing the vision of helping people get free.
And my final question, coming from the movie City Slickers, when they're riding out in the West, and Mitch asks the two buddies, his good friends, what was your best day?
My best day, um, I have so many of them, but they all have the same characteristic. It's when those ladies at the Addiction Recovery Center write me a thank you letter and say, thank you because now I'm free and I understand how I got here and I understand how to stay away from getting back here again.
Well, once again, we thank you for being a part of the work we're doing here to find those new ways of living. The old ways don't work. Just look around you, folks. And we're also giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. So, once again, thank you. And thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, video cast, love Talal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for being in my life and letting me be in yours. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.